fastest-growing desert city on the planet, Dubai. The city's most visible techno-marvel is the Burj Khalifa. What stops them from being roasted alive? The short answer? Water. The answer lies 80 kilometers to the east, in the Hajar Mountains.
Deep mountain valley, this wadi. We've got evidence of water everywhere that we live.
2 million years ago, Dubai was a really wet place. Where the skyscrapers stand today, mighty rivers flowed through a lush, fertile floodplain. But over time, temperatures rose and the rivers ran dry. As the desert swallowed the area, the water seeped away. But it didn't all vanish. Some of it moved underground. And today, it's still flowing through the rocks deep under the city. But it's no longer enough to quench the thirst of this expanding metropolis. The city relies on huge desalination plants that turn seawater into fresh water. Using a single giant pump to pipe water right to the top of a building as tall as the Burj Khalifa would be dangerous. Forcing water this high up takes extreme pressure, which could make the pipes explode. So engineers pump the water up in stages. First, to a huge reservoir on the 40th floor. Then to a series of 800,000-liter tanks, until it reaches the top of the building. Then the water simply flows back down under its own weight. Their glass skins conceal thousands of kilometers of pipes, sucking millions of liters of water a minute, from pipes buried deep under the sand, shielded from the scorching heat. The rest is used to cool down the city. But all around and below them, hidden under the streets and sidewalks, is soft desert sand. The big challenge for Dubai's engineers is to stop these towers from toppling over.
95 million years ago or so, they were part of the ocean floor. But then huge tectonic forces and compressional forces squeeze that seafloor and push these rocks up onto the edge of the continent, where they are now.
30 million years ago, a crash of two continental plates thrust the Hajar Mountains 3 kilometers upwards. Over millions of years, water raining down on their peaks ripped rocks away from the mountains and washed them all the way to Dubai. Here, they formed a thick layer of rubble. Today, this is buried up to 40 meters under the sand. That's why Dubai is one of the toughest places in the world to build skyscrapers. To reach the bedrock, Nasser's team must drill through 35 meters of sand. They fill the holes with a thick clay slurry to stop them from caving in. Then, they drop in long steel cages and pump 100 tons of concrete into each hole. This hardens into a rigid pillar, called a foundation pile. In Manhattan, a building like this needs just a handful of piles to stand up. In Dubai, it needs 250. They squash the ground under the skyscraper into a rock-solid foundation. In the last 20 years, engineers have built a forest of foundation piles under the city. There's more concrete per block under Sheikh Zayed Road than almost any other street in the world. But without these piles, Dubai as we know it would not exist. The Burj Al Arab, one of the tallest and most expensive hotels in the world. VIPs arrive 212 meters up on the helipad. But landing here isn't always a breeze. Today, the wind peaks at 75 kilometers an hour.
I'm just going to load up the blade and anticipate for a little bit of turbulence. There's wind coming on one side of the strut and the other side, and then they kind of merge together. Hope you enjoyed it. We went through turbulence.
Today was hairy, but it can get worse. The wind in Dubai can hit 130 kilometers an hour. Protecting buildings from these storms is another challenge for the city's engineers. The winds blowing across the Gulf are so strong they could bend or even break the building's concrete core. So engineers wrap the Burj Al Arab in a strong steel frame, bolted to a steel spine. An exoskeleton. This ingenious invention spreads the force of the wind and stabilizes the concrete core. Hidden inside the skeleton are shock absorbers. These move against the direction of the wind and reduce the motion even more. There's another threat: sand. They race towards Dubai at ferocious speeds, pelting thousands of tons of sand across the streets. Violent sandstorms can shut down the city for days. This one, caught on tape, reduces visibility to just a few meters. Sandstorms wreak havoc on anything that's not tied down. They clog gutters, stop traffic, and ground planes. In the firing line because it sits on the edge of the largest continuous stretch of sand and to pick up heavier grains of sand. They crash back down and release a myriad of dust particles. These billow high up into the air in dense clouds of driving sand.
It will hit the Burj. Everything is full of dust. Everything gets the
14 nights to wash all the sand off the Burj Al Arab. The driving force behind Dubai's incredible growth is oil. No place in the world has as much of it as the Arabian Gulf region, but tapping into it is not easy. The waters off Dubai can be over 70 meters deep. And then there's up to 4 kilometers of sand and rocks, sitting on top of the oil fields. Finding and exploiting these precious reservoirs is a real challenge. Traditional production rigs stand in one spot, fixed to foundations drilled deep into the sea floor. A jack-up rig is less restricted. It can float out wherever it's needed and then extend its long legs. Large flat feet spread its weight safely over the seabed. They hold the rig firm while its drill pierces the rock to tap into the treasure hidden under the Gulf. So much oil end up in one place. 200 million years ago, the area would have sat on the bottom of an ocean. Its warm, shallow waters teemed with microscopic sea creatures. As they died, they formed a carpet of cadavers on the seafloor. Sediments settled on top, increasing the pressure and heat below. Over time, this transformed the dead sea creatures into oil. This black gold sat trapped until cracks in the rocks around it allowed it to ooze upwards and pool in hundreds of pockets deep under the Gulf. It's this geological accident that really put Dubai on the map. On Earth. But to attract the super rich and sustain its growth, it needs to offer beachfront real estate, which is in limited supply. So engineers came up with this, but 150 million tons of sand. A satellite feeds the exact shape of the island to the ship's navigation systems. Pipes shoot the sand back into the sea until the rough shape of the island rises above the surface. Finally, boats with huge suction pumps smooth out the edges. Then, the island is ready for people to move in. It's a monumental feat of engineering. Pulling the plug on the ocean reveals its true scale. The size of 800 soccer fields. It sits inside a barrier made from 7 million tons of rock. 94 million tons of sand create space for over 5,000 homes. A luxury island resort built right into the ocean. Islands like the Palm are the ultimate way to expand the waterfront in Dubai. And this is the type of machine they use to build them. The cutter suction dredger Khalij Bay. It vacuums around 70,000 tons of sand and rock off the seafloor every week. Its secret weapon, this lethal. Construction crews have used more than 600 million tons of sand to create more than 900 city blocks of land in the sea. That's enough sand to bury an area the size of New York's Central Park more than a meter deep. The islands have created space for up to 3 million people, and there are plans to build even more. Together, they'll make the city's shoreline 7 times longer than it was. The dredgers have changed the coast of Dubai beyond recognition. But nature is fighting back. The wind and currents threaten to drag the sand back out to sea. Engineers must take drastic action to protect their coastline from the ocean. A huge wall of rocks that shields the islands from erosion. 4 years ago, divers discovered a huge coral reef, a rare find in these waters. But it lay at the entrance of a busy harbor, and the corals were dying. Brendan and his team they drilled holes into the boulders that form the reef, filled them with non-toxic glue, and inserted steel rods. A crane lifted the boulders from the seabed and tied them to a barge. Now, the crew could tow the corals 15 kilometers to their new home, so they never left. The team had to tow them out to the World Islands and gently lower them onto the breakwater, hoping the corals were undamaged.
They have been spread over the space of 10 football fields to give this coral the best chance it possibly has for survival.